The morning of February 19th, 1945 broke with the roar of diesel engines and the grinding of metal tracks across volcanic sand. At Green Beach on Iwo Jima, the fifth wave of landing craft disgorged 8 specially modified M4A3 Sherman tanks into the chaos of battle. The Marines had a name for these machines, Zippos, after the dependable lighter that never failed to spark. The Japanese defenders would soon know them by a different name, one whispered in terror through their tunnel networks: High-No Chariot, Chariots of Fire. These tanks, 4 assigned to the 4th Battalion and 4 to the 5th, carried something that would shatter everything the Japanese believed about defensive warfare in the Pacific. They could hurl streams of napalm-thickened gasoline across distances up to 400 feet, pouring liquid inferno into fortifications that military planners had deemed impenetrable. What unfolded over the coming weeks transcended mere tactical advantage. It became something far worse for the Japanese defenders, a psychological devastation of extraordinary magnitude. Months of grueling preparation, millions of cubic yards of excavated rock, an entire defensive philosophy built into the island itself would collapse against this single innovation. The Japanese had learned hard lessons after Saipan fell in July 1944. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, commanding the defense of Iwo Jima, had witnessed every major American assault since Tarawa. He studied them methodically, coldly, and reached a conclusion that overturned 3 years of established Japanese doctrine. The Americans could never be stopped at the waterline. In his underground command post, 75 feet beneath solid rock, Kuribayashi had issued Defense Order No. 1 on December 1st, 1944. The words were stark and final. We shall not engage the enemy on the beaches. We shall allow him to land. We shall permit him to advance. And we shall destroy him from positions he cannot assault. The arithmetic of death had shifted dramatically. At Tarawa, 4,500 Japanese soldiers had died across 76 hours of grinding beach combat. At Saipan, 30,000 defenders had been eliminated through nearly a month of desperate mobile warfare. But Kuribayashi commanded something different on Iwo Jima. 21,000 soldiers nested into 11 miles of interconnected tunnels spanning roughly 1,500 fortified positions. The construction effort had consumed 5,000 men, working in conditions that defied human endurance. Inside those tunnels, temperatures climbed to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, thick with toxic sulfur fumes so choking that workers could manage only 5-minute shifts before being rotated back outside to breathe. The network itself represented a staggering feat of military engineering. Some positions held merely 3 or 4 men. Others opened into vast chambers capable of sheltering 300 to 400 soldiers and supplies. Kuribayashi's personal command post sprawled across 150 meters of passages and rooms. Mount Suribachi, the volcanic cone dominating the island's landscape, had been hollowed out into 7 separate defensive levels. 800 concrete pillboxes stood scattered across the terrain, their walls reaching 4 feet thick, solid barriers against conventional assault. The Japanese had studied American tactics exhaustively. They knew about portable flamethrowers, the M1 and M2 models that could project fire outward 40 to 60 feet. They had designed their caves accordingly, with entrance passages stretching 100 feet or more before defenders would reach living spaces. They understood satchel charges and had calculated that volcanic rock would withstand any explosive load light enough for infantrymen to carry. What they had created represented perhaps the most formidable defensive complex of the entire war. 21,000 men had essentially vanished into 8 square miles of island. But their calculations had a blind spot, a weapon still in development, a tank that could project fire across distances they considered physically impossible. This revolutionary weapon had emerged from desperation in the Marshall Islands 13 months before. On February 1st, 1944, Marine tank crews assaulting Roy Namur had watched their shells bounce off Japanese bunkers that seemed to mock 75mm guns. The solution came through unexpected collaboration between the Naval Construction Battalions and the Chemical Warfare Service. Teams at Pearl Harbor's Navy Yard began converting damaged M4A3 Shermans into something entirely new, a flame projector system that Navy specifications designated the POACWSH-1, created specifically for Pacific conditions. The technical specifications read like science fiction to conventional tankers. The main armament had been stripped and replaced with a Mark I Navy flame projector operating at 300 pounds per square inch. The system could maintain continuous fire for between 55 and 80 seconds, releasing gallons of fuel per second. The fuel itself was a mixture of gasoline thickened with napalm. Aluminum salts of naphthenic and palmitic acids developed in 1942 by Louis Fieser's team at Harvard. When tested at Schofield Barracks in March 1944, the results astounded observers. The flame streams reached 400 feet under perfect conditions, though practical combat ranges typically settled between 150 and 200 yards. What emerged from the projector was not spray or mist, but a solid, coherent rod of fire that could be manipulated across targets with devastating precision. The real discovery came during testing. When thickened gasoline entered cave systems, it flowed through tunnel networks following gravity-down passages, around corners, continuing to burn at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit while systematically consuming all oxygen. The physics of destruction had been thoroughly documented. 2 days after the landing, on February 21, 1945, the first combat deployment occurred on the eastern slope of Mount Suribachi. Marine casualties were mounting steadily as concealed Japanese positions continued pouring concentrated fire onto advancing troops. Traditional assault methods were proving catastrophically expensive. The tank designated Satan, part of the 5th Battalion Complement, advanced to approximately 150 yards from suspected cave positions. At 14:37 hours, the flame gunner squeezed the firing mechanism. What followed matched the official after-action report's restrained description. Streams of liquid fire maintained cohesion across hundreds of feet before splashing against the mountainside and flowing into cave entrances. The napalm-thickened gasoline coursed down entrance tunnels, bypassing the defensive angles specifically designed to stop conventional weapons, accumulating in low spots where it continued burning intensely. The Japanese defensive manual, discovered after the battle, had devoted exactly 1 paragraph to flame weapons. The authors had assumed portable throwers with effective ranges of 20 meters and fuel supplies limiting bursts to 8 or 10 seconds. The flame tanks carried vastly larger quantities of fuel and could deliver sustained streams exceeding 60 seconds. The destruction mechanisms were multiple and lethal. Direct contact with fuel burning at 2,000 degrees caused instant casualties. Radiant heat produced third-degree burns at considerable distances from the flame itself. Oxygen depletion occurred within seconds in confined spaces. Carbon monoxide concentrations reached lethal levels almost immediately. The thermal expansion of superheated rock could trigger structural collapse throughout interconnected systems. A single sustained burst could render entire tunnel complexes uninhabitable. By February 23, 1945, the psychological dimension of the weapon had become apparent. When Lieutenant Colonel Chandler Johnson's 2nd Battalion of the 28th Marines supported the final assault on Mount Suribachi's summit defenses, Marine Corps records identified 165 caves on the volcano's slopes. Traditional tactics would have required appalling casualties to eliminate each position individually. Flame tank crews had developed systematic approaches documented in battalion reports. They operated in paired teams, 1 flame tank and 1 standard Sherman providing covering fire. The pattern was methodical. Advance to effective range, typically between 150 and 200 yards. Suppress visible positions with conventional fire. Engage cave positions with flame for 30 to 40 seconds. Displace and wait for secondary explosions from ammunition detonation. The results contradicted everything conventional wisdom predicted about cave warfare. The 28th Marines after-action report from February 23 documented 47 cave positions neutralized with 3 friendly wounded and an estimated 800 enemy killed. This represented a complete inversion of casualty expectations. Japanese command communications intercepted and decoded by Fleet Radio Unit Pacific revealed the shock reverberating through their defensive structure. February 22 at 0800 hours, request immediate countermeasures for enemy flame tanks. February 22nd at 14:30 hours. All units designate flame tanks priority targets. February 23rd at 0600 hours. Evacuation of forward caves authorized upon flame tank approach. February 23rd at 1800 hours. Suribachi garrison requests permission for final charge, cannot maintain positions against flame weapons. Combat operations generated immediate battlefield modifications documented by maintenance crews. Early difficulties included fuel mixture adjustments for cold morning temperatures and ignition system failures from volcanic dust accumulation. Solutions emerged quickly, installing secondary electric igniters and welding additional armor plating to protect against volcanic rock damage. Within days, crews experimented with mixing diesel fuel into the napalm gasoline, creating denser smoke for superior penetration into ventilation systems. They developed the splash technique, deliberately overshooting cave mouths to allow burning fuel to cascade down cliff faces into hidden entrances. Colonel Baron Takeshi Nishi, commanding the 26th Tank Regiment, attempted to counterattack with his remaining Type 97 tanks. The engagement on February 24th lasted mere minutes. 3 Japanese tanks fell without any American tanks sustaining damage. Nishi himself would die in a cave in the island's northern sector, according to records recovered after the war. By February 26, 1945, the assault on Hills 382 and 362A demonstrated the weapon's devastating capability against interconnected bunker complexes. The defensive network beneath Hill 382 featured multiple tunnel levels connecting dozens of individual positions, according to captured Japanese engineering documents. Marines began the assault at 0630 hours. Flame tanks targeted ventilation shafts rather than cave entrances, allowing gravity to distribute fire throughout the entire complex. Official reports noted smoke emerging from dozens of previously concealed exits, effectively mapping the tunnel architecture below. The 3rd Marine Division's intelligence section observed something unprecedented: defenders abandoning positions before flame tanks even arrived. Bunkers were discovered completely empty, supplies and ammunition left untouched, a development that violated everything in Japanese military doctrine. By late February, Marine intelligence documented what they termed cascade collapse in Japanese morale. The physical destruction paled beside the psychological devastation. For the first time anywhere in the Pacific War, significant numbers of Japanese soldiers surrendered rather than accept death. Prisoners described the flame tanks using terms like demon weapon and dragon's breath. The 216 prisoners captured during the battle represented the first major Japanese surrenders of the entire Pacific campaign. Post-war interrogations revealed an uncomfortable truth for military analysts. Many soldiers had surrendered specifically to avoid incineration. Captured Japanese documents showed units abandoning prepared positions merely upon reports of approaching flame tanks. This represented something far more fundamental than tactical defeat. It was the complete collapse of the Bushido Code that had sustained Japanese resistance through every previous battle. By March 2, 1945, the systematic employment of flame tanks at Motoyama Airfield No. 2 demonstrated the weapon's proven doctrine. Japanese forces had constructed 280 interconnected strongpoints around the airfield according to captured defensive plans. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Chambers, commanding the 3rd Battalion of the 25th Marines, had estimated in his operations order that conventional tactics would require over 1,000 casualties. Flame tanks executing preparatory reduction before infantry advance would change that calculation fundamentally. The grid-by-grid systematic reduction proceeded methodically. Multiple positions were discovered abandoned before assault, personal effects and supplies left behind untouched, a measure of Japanese demoralization that continued escalating as the battle wore on. The operation demonstrated conclusively that Japanese forces were choosing survival over death on an unprecedented scale. Through modified oil prospecting equipment, detection teams could locate subterranean tunnel networks beneath the surface and feed critical targeting information to flame tank commanders. Major General Graves Erskine, who led the 3rd Marine Division, documented this revolutionary approach in his official reports, calling it three-dimensional warfare where forces fought simultaneously across multiple levels. above ground, at ground level, and deep underground in interconnected tunnel systems. The fusion of seismic technology with flame weapons created a devastating combination against the elaborate tunnel complexes the Japanese had constructed. By mid-March, flame tank tactics had undergone substantial refinement. Although the standard effective range stayed between 150 and 200 yards, crews experimented constantly with fuel mixtures and pressure adjustments to stretch their range further when tactical situations demanded it. Official Marine Tank Battalion records preserve documentation of numerous technical adaptations developed during actual combat operations. The psychological weight of these weapons transcended their actual destructive capacity. Japanese radio transmissions captured by American intelligence units revealed a widespread conviction that American flame weapons possessed virtually unlimited range, a belief that contributed substantially to the collapse of their defensive lines. Documented in official Marine Corps records, flame tank operations during the entire Iwo Jima campaign, spanning from February 19th through March 26, 1945, totaled exactly 36 days of intense combat. 8 flame tanks arrived on the island, distributed evenly, 4 assigned to the 4th Tank Battalion and 4 to the 5th. At the height of operations, fuel consumption reached between 5,000 and 10,000 gallons daily. Unit records document hundreds of cave positions neutralized, while Japanese casualties from these weapons numbered in the thousands, though the precise count remains undetermined. Marine commanders estimated the number of casualties avoided through flame tank deployment at thousands, based on calculations of traditional cave assault tactics. Historical analysis revealed that conventional infantry assaults on such positions typically required multiple squads and resulted in predicted casualty rates of 20 to 30% per location. Flame tank crews, by contrast, could neutralize numerous positions each hour with comparatively minimal American losses. This success at Iwo Jima shaped the strategic planning for Operation Downfall, the anticipated invasion of the Japanese home islands. Documents from the Joint Chiefs of Staff indicate that military planners requested expanded flame tank production based directly on results demonstrated at Iwo Jima. The proven capability to systematically destroy cave defenses fundamentally recalculated invasion projections. Post-war interrogations conducted by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey revealed that Japanese military assessments acknowledged flame tanks had rendered their entire defensive strategy obsolete. Certain Japanese officers testified that this realization, alongside the atomic weapons attacks, influenced their consideration of surrender. Corporal Herschel Woody Williams, recipient of the Medal of Honor for actions on February 23, 1945, left among the most comprehensive first-hand accounts of flame tank employment. Carrying a portable flamethrower and supported by covering riflemen, Williams systematically destroyed successive Japanese strongpoints, clearing paths for advancing Marines. His medal citation emphasized how he neutralized position after position, facilitating Marine advances through previously impassable terrain. Williams would later describe the tactical significance of flame weapons in his own words. The Japanese had engineered these fortifications to resist everything we threw at them, but fire operates where bullets cannot reach. It penetrates every gap, every crevice, every hidden space. A single flame tank accomplished what would have demanded dozens of our men to achieve, and far fewer would have come home. Flame tank crews documented substantial psychological strain from operating such weapons. Post-war studies conducted by the Veterans Administration discovered that flame tank personnel reported combat stress at elevated rates compared to other armored units. The direct personal nature of flame warfare, the visual and auditory exposure to enemy deaths, created singular psychological burdens. Seized Japanese documents and subsequent interrogations disclosed the complete underestimation of flame tank warfare in Japanese defensive planning. The Japanese possessed extensive familiarity with handheld flamethrowers, but had fundamentally miscalculated vehicle-mounted weapons featuring extended range and massive fuel reserves. General Kuribayashi's transmission before his death in late March conveyed the bitter reality. Enemy flame tanks have obliterated our cave defenses. Fortifications requiring months of labor fall to destruction in mere minutes. American technological superiority has triumphed over Japanese determination. This intercepted message proved to American signals intelligence the overwhelming impact of flame technology. Testimony from surviving Japanese personnel confirmed the dread these weapons generated. A survivor interviewed by war crimes investigators described how soldiers who had previously demonstrated courage in facing conventional combat suddenly abandoned their positions when confronted by flame tanks. These weapons inflicted a mode of death that violated established concepts of honorable military conduct. Tactical lessons learned at Iwo Jima immediately transferred to operations on Okinawa beginning April 1, 1945. Marine Corps documentation shows substantially expanded flame tank deployment featuring refined methods derived from Iwo Jima experience. Colonel Hiromichi Yohara, operations officer for the Japanese 32nd Army defending Okinawa, had studied captured Iwo Jima reports according to intelligence documents recovered after the battle. His defensive preparations incorporated water storage systems, expanded tunnel architecture, and fire barriers. Yet these measures proved equally ineffective against enhanced American flame tank employment. Marine formations on Okinawa received expanded flame tank support, accompanied by dedicated fuel infrastructure. The newly formed 713th Flamethrower Tank Battalion, created specifically for Okinawa operations, achieved even more dramatic results than recorded at Iwo Jima. Flame tank warfare demanded extraordinary industrial infrastructure beyond the weapons themselves. Navy construction units installed fuel storage and mixing apparatus even amid continuing combat. The resulting infrastructure encompassed underground fuel storage, chemical mixing facilities for napalm production, extensive pipeline distribution networks, and forward ammunition points. The Chemical Warfare Service documented that daily operations required delivery of thousands of gallons of fuel components. The entire supply apparatus, stretching from chemical manufacturing plants on the American mainland, producing napalm compounds, through to frontline fuel preparation, exhibited industrial capacity that Japanese forces possessed no means to match. Medical records preserved aboard Navy hospital ships documented the distinctive injuries produced by flame weapons. Severe burns, smoke inhalation, and carbon monoxide poisoning demanded specialized medical treatment. The hospital ship USS Samaritan recorded treating both American personnel and Japanese wounded from flame operations, although Japanese soldiers initially rejected assistance, convinced they had forfeited their honor through survival. International Red Cross personnel, permitted to examine prisoner facilities, documented that Japanese soldiers expressed extraordinary fear of flame weapons. This fear contributed to unprecedented surrender numbers compared to earlier Pacific campaigns. Flame tank innovations demonstrated at Iwo Jima influenced military development, extending across subsequent decades. Official military histories document direct connection from these weapons to flame tanks deployed in Korea, flame equipment in Vietnam, and contemporary thermobaric systems employing comparable methodology. The fundamental concept, utilizing flowing burning fluid to clear enclosed defensive positions, maintains ongoing relevance to modern combat scenarios. Current military doctrine addressing tunnel and cave warfare continues referencing operational lessons derived from Iwo Jima flame tank employment. Marine Corps official histories emphasize that flame-throwing tank development constituted one of the most significant American technological innovations throughout the entire Pacific campaign. When deployed at Iwo Jima, these weapons proved critical for destroying Japanese cave positions that would otherwise have demanded thousands of Marine casualties using conventional assault procedures. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, concluded in his official report that flame-throwing tanks represented the single most effective weapon available for neutralizing Japanese cave defenses. Absent these weapons, our casualties would have multiplied beyond acceptable bounds. General Holland Smith, commanding amphibious forces, recorded his assessment that the 8 flame tanks positioned on Iwo Jima delivered tactical value equivalent to an entire infantry battalion when considering their capacity to destroy Japanese fortifications. They protected countless Marine lives. Although flame tanks substantially reduced American casualties, they simultaneously created distinctive moral challenges documented within military chaplain records. Marines confronted moral complexity regarding the weapon while acknowledging its necessity. Military chaplains reported increased counseling requests specifically from flame tank crews compared to personnel in other units. Japanese testimony preserved from post-war proceedings and captured documents illustrates the thoroughgoing collapse of their defensive doctrine. Fighting units prepared for traditional combat discovered themselves retreating from a form of death utterly foreign to their experience. This psychological collapse preceded and facilitated their physical defeat. Military legal examinations conducted throughout and following the war confirmed that flame weapons complied with international legal standards. The Geneva and Hague Conventions contained no specific prohibitions against these weapons. Employment against military fortifications constituted legitimate warfare under then-current understanding of international law. Post-war, war crimes proceedings prosecuted neither flame weapon usage by the United States nor comparable Japanese applications. These weapons received legal classification as legitimate tools for destroying cave fortifications when conventional methods would have required unacceptable casualty levels. Memorial reunions beginning in 1970 on Iwo Jima brought together American and Japanese veterans for ceremonies of remembrance. These gatherings, documented by both governments, illustrated reconciliation between former adversaries. The 40th anniversary reunion in 1985 witnessed Japanese and American veterans meeting at locations where flame tanks had operated. Japanese survivors recognized the weapon's tactical importance, while Americans reciprocated respect for Japanese valor. Documented interactions between these military historians demonstrate how previous enemies discovered common understanding through shared experience. The 85th anniversary gathering in March 2025 included merely 7 American participants, highlighting the inevitable passage of this generation. Their recorded testimonies for historical archives stress simultaneously the urgency and tragedy inherent in flame warfare. Extensive documentation within the National Archives preserves comprehensive records of flame tank operations throughout the battle. Tank battalion war diaries, official after-action reports, and technical documentation provide thorough operational records. Japanese documents secured following the battle alongside testimony from subsequent interrogations confirm the weapon's significance. The Marine Corps History Division maintains official records establishing that flame tanks fundamentally transformed cave warfare methodology. These weapons demonstrated that technological advancement could overcome defensive strengths previously responsible for thousands of casualties during earlier operations. Combat photography displays flame tanks deployed in action, their fire streams reaching toward Japanese emplacements. Preserved film footage within military archives captures the weapon's devastating effectiveness against cave systems. The delivery of 8 flame tanks to Iwo Jima transcended simple tactical improvement. It exemplified how industrial manufacturing and technological development could fundamentally reshape warfare dynamics. These weapons eliminated defensive advantages that Japanese forces had devoted months constructing. Streams of liquid fire, capable of reaching 400 feet in ideal conditions, did more than destroy caves. They obliterated illusions concerning modern industrial warfare mechanics. Japanese forces, anticipating conventional assault, encountered weapons that flowed through their defenses with the inevitability of American victory flowing from industrial might. Japanese soldiers who evacuated positions upon encountering flame tanks exercised rational judgment when facing weapons that converted their fortifications into killing chambers. Their methodical preparation, grounded in traditional combat assumptions, proved meaningless against liquid fire that descended through tunnels with gravitational certainty and consumed atmosphere from every chamber. Flame tanks preserved thousands of American lives through avoidance of casualties inherent in systematic cave-by-cave assault. Simultaneously, they produced a form of death that haunted those who deployed them and terrified those who endured them. This contradiction, salvation for one side, devastation for the other, encompasses their historical significance. Military scholars recognized flame tanks at Iwo Jima as pivotal technological innovation that compressed the battle duration and diminished American casualties. The weapons confirmed that within modern industrial warfare, technological advantage could overwhelm human courage and resolve when the disparity reached sufficient magnitude. The 8 flame tanks positioned on Iwo Jima embodied fundamental modern warfare truth. Triumph belongs not necessarily to the determined or courageous, but to those commanding superior technology and possessing industrial means to deploy it decisively. Japanese defenders realized that warrior spirit could not withstand liquid fire, that bravery could not counter chemistry, and that resolve accomplished nothing when flames advanced through tunnels following natural forces. The Iwo Jima battle concluded on March 26, 1945, following 36 days of sustained fighting. Approximately 21,000 Japanese defenders perished, with only roughly 20,000 deaths confirmed. Merely 216 surrendered during the entire engagement, a surrender rate unprecedented in Pacific operations. American forces sustained 6,140 killed and 17,113 wounded, according to documented casualty records. Without flame tank deployment, these numbers would have expanded substantially. The transformation completed the transition from confidence in defensive fortifications to comprehension that technology could nullify any positional advantage. Flame tanks had established that within modern war calculations, industrial manufacturing multiplied by technological progress yields victory, independent of human courage opposing it. Currently, Iwo Jima, returned to its original Japanese designation Iwo-to, functions as historical testimony to modern warfare's toll. The caves that harbored Japanese defenders persist, several still bearing scorch marks from flame tank operations decades prior. They remain permanent reminders of the moment when liquid fire revolutionized cave warfare understanding and illustrated industrial power's decisive capacity in modern conflict.